Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Path to Purpose, How Young People Find Their Calling in Life, by William Damon, narrated by Daniel Henning. Preface. In my career as a research psychologist, I've always chosen topics of study that seemed interesting and important to me, or why would I bother? But I've never felt compelled to explore a particular subject. The idea of studying purpose came upon me differently. It did not feel like just another research topic, but rather a culmination of the work that I had been doing on moral commitment, character education, and human development for over 30 years. What's more, at a time when a prevalent sense of emptiness looms as one of our greatest contemporary psychological dangers, the study of purpose seemed to me crucial in a societal sense. In my prior work, I had encountered the notion of purpose many times, but dimly and indirectly, as if through a telescope with an ill-fitted lens. None of my earlier studies was about purpose per se, yet I now see that much of what I had been trying to understand for many years does in fact hinge on purpose. A study I conducted with Anne Colby of extraordinary moral commitment found that people who pursue noble purposes are filled with joy, despite the constant sacrifices that they feel called upon to make. In a subsequent series of studies with Howard Gardner and Mihai Csikszentmihalyi of men and women who have done socially valuable good work in their careers, I was struck by how vividly these people were able to answer our questions about what they were trying to accomplish and why. An elevated purpose was always on their minds, driving their daily efforts. This purpose was their ultimate concern, essential to all their personal successes. It gave them energy. It gave them satisfaction when they accomplished their goals, and it gave them persistence when they ran into obstacles. Later, when I was invited to help create some educational workshops for fostering good work among mid-career journalists, I and my colleagues found that the most useful opening question for our training workshops was, what is the purpose that you are trying to accomplish in your work? This work led me to examine how young people find their purposes in life. Do adolescents have purposes? And if so, how do they learn them? What kinds of purposes, in addition to those related to careers, are inspiring today's young? What happens when young people are unable to find any purpose at all to devote themselves to? The present book is the first account of the insights that I and my students have been gaining through our initial research into these questions. This is the third book that I've written about youth development with a public audience in mind, one per decade, it seems, since 1988. The Moral Child in 1988, Greater Expectations in 1995, and now The Path to Purpose. Looking back, I can see that each book has been to some extent a product of its time. During the 1980s, I was troubled about the ethic of moral relativism that was swaying the intellectual currents of American culture and beginning to trickle down to schools and the media. In The Moral Child, I made a case for the universality of core moral values and the importance of clarity in the moral education of young people. A fair number of people read the book, but it certainly did not have much impact on our cultural practices. Indeed, by the 1990s, the culture of child-rearing had become thoroughly dominated by approaches that looked askance at moral standards, and, for that matter, standards of any kind, as vestiges of insensitive traditionalism. Self-esteem had become the holy grail of child-rearing, and parents were advised to avoid traumatizing their, supposedly, fragile children by asserting authority too forcefully or urging them to strive for excellence, take on challenges, and control their behavior according to ethical strictures. In response, I wrote Greater Expectations, Overcoming the Culture of Indulgence in Our Homes and Schools. This time, I believe, people did listen, not just to me. Other like-minded social critics were voicing similar concerns. By the end of the decade, phrases such as high standards and character education could be heard on the tongues of influential educators and public officials whenever they spoke about their policies for youth. A number of things did start to improve. Youth crime has abated to some extent. Voluntary service among the young has skyrocketed, and most of the experts stopped treating self-esteem as the highest goal of human development. These, I believe, are all good developments, improving capacities to promote the well-being and future prospects of our young. And many young people today are thriving in every sense of the word. But the present time, too, has its hazards, and they are serious. The most pervasive problem of the day is a sense of emptiness that has ensnared many young people in long periods of drift, during a time in their lives when they should be defining their aspirations and making progress toward their fulfillment. For too many young people today, apathy and anxiety have become the dominant moods, and disengagement, or even cynicism, has replaced the natural hopefulness of youth. This is not a problem that can be addressed by solutions advanced in the past. In fact, the high standards that I and others have argued for are not a sufficient answer to this particular matter. The message that young people do best when they are challenged to strive, to achieve, to serve, a message that I still hold with conviction, fails to address the most essential question of all. For what purpose? Or, in a word, why? For young people, this concern means starting to ask and answer questions such as, what do I hope to accomplish with all my efforts, with all the striving that I am expected to do? What are the higher goals that give these efforts meaning? What matters to me, and why should it matter? What is my ultimate concern in life? Unless we make such questions a central part of our conversations with young people, we can do little but sit back and watch while they wander into a sea of confusion, drift, self-doubt, and anxiety. Feelings that too often arise when work and striving are unaccompanied by a sense of purpose. Youth is a time of idealism, and young people take advice about seeking fulfillment and passion in life seriously. But such advice, given only at the margins of their daily experience, such as at commencement time or other ceremonial occasions, tends to be rich in generalities and sparse in useful details. In the real world of competition, job requirements, and societal responsibilities, how, the young person wonders, can I manage to find something that is both rewarding and meaningful? How can I pursue my dreams and avoid selling out without diminishing my chances to provide for myself and the family I would like to have? How can I earn a living as a valued member of society and make a positive difference in the world? These are questions that, sooner or later, all young people must confront in order to make their most crucial life choices. Perhaps they find the answers in their schools or colleges. I wish I could say that this was the case. Most secondary schools are good at building basic skills, and they've been improving at this task in recent years. Colleges are good at exposing young people to a wonderful array of ideas and cultural understandings. All of these educational gifts enrich a student's intellectual and personal life in immeasurable ways. But when it comes to guiding students toward future paths that they will find rewarding and meaningful, our schools fall short. Students learn bits and pieces of knowledge that they may see little use for, and from time to time, someone at a school assembly urges them to go and do great things in the world. When it comes to drawing connections between the two, that is, showing students why and how a math formula or a history lesson could be important for some purpose that a student may wish to pursue, schools too often fall far short. If you visit a typical classroom and listen to what the teacher enjoins students to do, you will hear a host of study assignments, exam instructions, and lots of drill and practice. If you listen for the teacher's reasons why the students should perform these tasks, you will hear a host of narrow, instrumental goals, such as doing well in the class, getting good grades, and avoiding failure. or perhaps, if the students are lucky, the value of learning a specific skill for its own sake. But rarely, if ever, will you hear the teacher discuss with students broader purposes that any of these goals might lead to. Why do people read or write poetry? Why do scientists split genes? Why, indeed, did I myself work hard to become a teacher? Incredibly, in all my years as a scholar of youth development and education, I've never seen a single instance of a teacher sharing with students the reasons why he or she went into the teaching profession. Nor, for that matter, have I often heard such conversations about the deeper meaning of our efforts within families, or in any media shows marketed to youth. How can we expect that young people will find meaning in what they're doing if we so rarely draw their attention to the personal meaning and purpose of what we work at in our daily lives? My studies and this book have a purpose of their own: to make a case for the primary importance of purpose in youth development. I hope to make this case for all those who take an interest in the young, whether as parents, educators, scientists, professionals in the field of youth development, or citizens in the society that today's young will someday inherit. Among all these constituencies, the notion of purpose is already familiar to some degree. There have been some prior studies of youth purpose in psychological science, although not as many as one might expect, and Rick Warren's 2003 blockbuster, The Purpose-Driven Life, drew widespread public attention to the concept from a devoutly religious perspective. The new field of positive psychology also has been shining a welcome spotlight on the benefits of purpose. But still, in our efforts to work constructively with the young, purpose is an underutilized tool. Despite all the talk about purpose in the mass media and in other popular settings, purpose remains a marginal concern in the human sciences, in most of our families, and in practically all of our schools. In other words, in just about all of the places that try to understand young people in order to promote their healthy development. My hope is that this book may help change that. W.D. Palo Alto, California, January 2008. 1. Young Lives Adrift. The life prospects of a young person in today's world are far from certain. Only a few decades ago, almost all young people knew by the end of adolescence where they would live, what their occupation would be, and whom they were going to marry. Today, most young people have no answers to these questions well into adulthood. The global economy has increased the opportunities and pressures for young people to move far from the communities that they grew up in. Even many of the best educated will spend years in casual jobs without settling into a permanent line of work. And indeed, the whole notion of a permanent line of work has come into question, as many careers are evolving into a succession of relatively short-term, disconnected jobs. As for establishing their own families, young adults all over the world are deferring or declining marriage. If current trends continue, an increasing share of the youth population will never marry, or may wait until their childbearing years are almost past. Some of today's young welcome these changes and the new opportunities they offer. These young people have formulated clear aspirations for their future. They're strongly motivated, full of energy, optimistic, and have created realistic plans to accomplish their ambitions. Confident in themselves, they enjoy exploring the world and testing the limits of their potential. Far from needing any protection or prodding, they almost can't be held back. In a word, they have found a strong sense of purpose to inspire them and provide them with direction. At the same time, many of their peers are floundering. In the face of the serious choices ahead of them as they move toward adulthood, they feel as though they are drifting or stalled in their personal and social development. A large portion of today's young people are hesitating to make commitments to any of the roles that define adult life, such as parent, worker, spouse, or citizen. This delayed commitment among the young is taking place today all over the industrial world, from the United States to Japan to Europe. In Italy, to cite one extreme case, it has been reported that the majority of 30-year-olds still live at home with their parents and are neither married nor fully employed. In the United States, a study of youth in their late teens and early 20s concluded marriage, home, and children are seen by most of them not as achievements to be pursued, but as perils to be avoided. The British government was the first to officially recognize the growing phenomenon of unoccupied young adults when, in a national report 5 years ago, it coined the term young NEETs, not in education, employment, or training. Recently, the Japanese government has reported with evident alarm that almost 1 million of its own youthful population had become NEETs. And this in a society long known for its strong intergenerational work ethic. None of these reports has cited any economic slowdown as the problem. The economy in Europe, Asia, the United States, and other parts of the industrial world has been growing rapidly enough to offer plentiful employment opportunities for the young. But many are holding back. Perhaps they are daunted by the uncertainties they face. Perhaps they are fearful of perils they perceive in the choices they might make, or perhaps they consider the prospects available to them to be uninspiring and devoid of meaning. The reasons behind their hesitation often seem mysterious to parents and educators, many of whom are becoming concerned that these young people have yet to find the kinds of engagements and commitments that make life fulfilling. Many parents are also voicing the concern, often humorously at first, but less so over time, that their progeny may become boomerangers, returning to their home nests long after they were supposed to have flown away on their own wings. I've come to call this the "how can I get my wonderful daughter to move out of our basement?" question. Of course, not all parents are troubled by seeing their children take some extra time to strike out on their own, and there is a positive side to the story. It does indicate a closeness that has eluded many families in prior decades. These days, grown children feel comfortable staying in their family homes, and they do actually seem to enjoy hanging around their parents and communicating with them much more openly than did people of the boomer generation when they themselves were young. A bit of light on this matter was shed by a May 2007 Fortune magazine piece on Baby Boomers' Kids, written delightfully by Nadira Hira, who identifies herself as one of those kids. Extolling correctly the extraordinary talent, energy, and creativity that mark her cohort of young people, the author makes the case that all that questioning that her peers are doing will lead us to some important answers. In the meantime, the extended period of questioning and self-exploration is delaying that transition to permanent work and a home of their own far beyond that of any prior generation. Hira cites a survey of American college students from 2000 through 2006, showing that almost 2/3 of the graduates moved home after college, and over half of these stayed for more than a year. She quotes one 28-year-old, who himself wrote a book on the subject, as saying, "If we don't like a job, we quit, because the worst thing that can happen is that we move back home. There's no stigma. Our moms would love nothing more than to cook our favorite meatloaf." Another young adult, a 24-year-old woman, echoes this sentiment. "I think parents want to feel needed, and it's like, because I'm so independent, they get excited when I ask for a favor." Now, parental love for children is one of the world's great blessings. And it is true, fortunately, that most parents will gladly do anything to help their children get along. Also, it is unambiguously a good thing that most children feel secure in their expectations that parents will provide for their needs. But I'm not convinced that most parents hope to spend their golden years providing basic needs for their children. Nor do I believe that this truly would be in the best interests of the children themselves. What is in children's best interests is to find ways to make their own contributions to their families and eventually to the world beyond themselves. The ultimate problem is not the parent's role in the child's life, but rather the child's own personal fulfillment. During the adolescent years, a certain amount of soul-searching and experimentation is healthy. Adolescence is a transitory period of development, a kind of way station on the road to a mature self-identity. This formative period of life is said to begin with the onset of puberty and end with a firm commitment to adult social roles, such as those cited earlier: parent, spouse, worker, and citizen. During this key time of transition to adulthood, it is sensible for young people to spend time examining themselves, considering their futures, and looking around for the opportunities that best suit their own ambitions and interests. For many young people, an extended period of exploration and reflection during adolescence may be necessary to establish a fulfilling self-identity and a positive direction in life. This is what the renowned psychologist Erik Erikson once described as a constructive moratorium from reality. And yes, this identity formation task, in some cases, can take years of postponing choices in order to resolve the task successfully. Yet the postponements of many young people today have taken on a troubling set of characteristics, and chief among them is that so many youth do not seem to be moving toward any resolution. Their delay is characterized more by indecision than by motivated reflection, more by confusion than by the pursuit of clear goals, more by ambivalence than by determination. Directionless drift is not a constructive moratorium in either a developmental or a societal sense. Without a sense of direction, opportunities are lost, and doubt and self-absorption can set in. Maladaptive habits are established, and adaptive ones are not built. It is not that there is a critical period for the acquisition of a fruitful direction in life, but it is the case that excessive delay beyond the period of readiness creates the serious risk that the young person may give up altogether on the tasks of finding a positive direction, sustaining that direction, and acquiring the skills needed to achieve the directional goals. Today's young people are well aware that they will need to make a transition from adolescence to adulthood at some point. But for too many of them, this awareness, which can be a source of keen anticipation for those who look to their futures with hope, triggers a sense of vague foreboding, or worse, a debilitating anxiety that can lead to further developmental paralysis. Indeed, extended disengagement from adult social roles is a prescription for anxiety and depression. To remain uncommitted to career, family, and other serious community responsibilities is an untenable position for a young person to settle into. Such disengagement becomes increasingly uncomfortable over time. It cannot continue indefinitely without psychological costs. I do not wish to suggest that most of today's young are in deep trouble or any kind of immediate peril. In fact, the most visible indicators of youth well-being look somewhat better today, or at least not worse, than they did 10 or 15 years ago. In the United States, today's young people are less likely than the young people of 10 years ago to become pregnant while still teenagers. They are less prone to violence and crime. They are somewhat less vulnerable to the lure of addictive drugs, and they are no more prone to major eating disorders, with the exception of obesity, which is still on the rise among youngsters and adults alike. Most students are staying in school for more years and are attending classes with greater regularity. Students are working harder and learning a bit more, at least judging from the most recent test score results. Many young people fill their schedules with wholesome activities, from sports to arts to hiking and camping clubs. Although the problems of youth that made so many headlines in the United States a decade ago have certainly not all been solved, they have stopped going in the wrong direction. And in many areas, there has been gradual and marked progress. Indeed, many young people today are thriving, as I noted at the outset. But others only appear to be doing well, and far too many seem stuck, rudderless, and lacking a sense of what they want to do with their lives. They may be keeping out of trouble and achieving what we ask of them, but actually they're drifting. Without a clear sense of direction, they look like they are on track, but they may be only a step away from falling or jumping off the track that they appeared to be on. Many are themselves aware that something is missing from their lives, although often they can articulate their awareness only indirectly through expressions of anxiety, so stressed out, cynicism, like I should care, or apathy, whatever. Few people around them know what is bothering these youngsters, except in extreme cases where a failure to thrive of crisis proportions brings the aimlessness unavoidably to light. What is too often missing, not altogether absent, but evident only in a minority of today's youth, is the kind of wholehearted dedication to an activity or interest that stems from a serious purpose, a purpose that can give meaning and direction to life. A study of youth purpose. How bad is the problem really? About 7 years ago, I began an investigation into what happens when a young person finds, or does not find, purpose in life. From my earlier observations of adolescents and young adults making their way through today's world, I had come to suspect that much of the difference between young people who were thriving and those who were floundering could be explained by whether or not they had found a compelling purpose, in a career, in building a family of their own, or in some other way of making a difference in the world. I also suspected that the discontent or anxiety that so many young people were feeling was connected to purposelessness. As I will address in more detail later, a good deal of work in psychology has revealed that there is a powerful link between the pursuit of a positive purpose and life satisfaction. In my investigation into the role of purpose in young lives, I and my team of researchers have conducted a series of studies that has included surveys and in-depth interviews with adolescents and young adults in several parts of the United States. We have also developed case studies of some young people who've demonstrated truly extraordinary commitments to purpose, many of whom discovered such purpose at an early age. In chapters 3 and 4 of this book, I report highlights from the first of these studies. For now, I will simply note that our initial findings reveal a society in which purposefulness among young people is the exception rather than the rule. In our interviews and surveys, only about 1 in 5 young people in the 12 to 22-year age range express a clear vision of where they want to go, what they want to accomplish in life, and why. The largest portion of those we interviewed, almost 60%, may have engaged in some potentially purposeful activities, or they may have developed some vague aspirations, but they do not have any real commitment to such activities or any realistic plans for pursuing their aspirations. The remaining portion of today's youth population, almost a quarter of those we interviewed in the first of our studies, express no aspirations at all. In some cases, they claim that they see no point in acquiring any. Tommy, an 18-year-old from Pennsylvania, is one of those who expressed absolutely no sense of purpose when we interviewed him. He was halfway through his freshman year in college at the time and had not yet been at all motivated by anything he had studied in school. Nor did he consider that there was any good reason to drop out. He knew of no better alternatives outside the university, and he had found the schoolwork easy enough. In fact, Tommy said he was quite content to just drift. He complacently conveyed a conviction that things would surely work out one way or another, whether or not he mobilized himself to do anything about it. And since he had no particular goal in mind, he was indifferent to exactly how his future might take shape. Tommy's indifference applied to his everyday decisions as well as his broader reflections. On the issue of choosing his academic program, he said, "I don't know what I'm going to take next term. They make you pick some courses. I'll just say, what the hell, and flip a coin or something." On the question of aspirations, Tommy was quite comfortable with having none. "I don't really have goals for my future. What's the big deal about that? It would be fun to travel. I'd like that, especially if I could get someone to pay for it." Tommy is one of a number of young people today who express no need for goals or ambitions. Some of these disaffected, like Tommy himself, show little sign of being bothered by their lack of direction. Another boy we interviewed, a 17-year-old from New Jersey, embraced his purposelessness in the following manner. Apathy seems to have worked out well for me. If you don't care, things don't bother you. So far, just being lazy and letting the chips fall where they may has been all right.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?